everyone, Sakshi here. Welcome back to CivilsCore. Today we have a very special session. 10 Modern India MCQs, all medium to high difficulty, all the kind UPSC loves to set in the actual prelims paper. Let us begin. Question 1. Read this passage carefully. The King of Portugal in 1505 appointed him as governor in India. His mission was to consolidate Portuguese power, destroy Muslim trade by seizing Aden, Ormuz and Malacca, and build fortresses at Anjadiva, Cochin, Cananore and Kilwa. His vision was to make Portugal the master of the Indian Ocean. His policy was called the Blue Water Policy, also known as the Cartaze system. Who is being described here? Pedro Alvarez Cabral, Alfonso de Albuquerque, Francisco de Almeida, or Nuno da Cunha? The answer is C. Francisco de Almeida. Now let me explain why students get this wrong. The two names that confuse everyone are Almeida and Albuquerque. They both served as Portuguese governors in India, so UPSC deliberately uses features of one to test if you know the other. Here is the clean distinction. Almeida was appointed in 1505 and his entire philosophy was naval. He believed Portugal's strength lay in controlling the sea, not in holding territory on land. This is why his policy is called the Blue Water Policy or Cartaze system. Portuguese ships would issue permits called cartazes to other ships trading in the Indian Ocean. No cartaz meant your cargo could be seized. This was essentially a maritime toll system designed to strangle Muslim, Arab and Egyptian trade. Now the dramatic part. In 1507, Almeida faced the combined navies of Egypt's Mameluke Sultan and the Gujarat Sultanate and was defeated at the Battle of Diu. His own son was killed in that battle. Almeida avenged this by crushing both navies in a return engagement. He remained governor until Albuquerque replaced him. Albuquerque, in contrast, believed in building forts and capturing key ports on land. Goa fell to Albuquerque. So the memory aid is simple. Almeida equals blue water, Albuquerque equals territorial conquest. Question 2. With reference to the Hindustan Republican Association or HRA, which of the following persons were among its founders? Ram Prasad Bismil, Jogesh Chatterjee, Sachindranath Sanyal, Gopinath Saha. How many were founders? The answer is C. Only 3. The Hindustan Republican Association was formed in October 1924 in Kanpur. Its goal was to overthrow British rule through an organized armed revolution and establish a federal republic of the United States of India. Now let us go through each name. Ram Prasad Bismil was a founder. He was the primary leader of the HRA in the United Provinces, a brilliant poet and a sharp strategist. He was later martyred after the Kakori train action of 1925. Next is Jogesh Chatterjee, who was also a founder of the HRA. He was responsible for building the revolutionary network across Bengal and Bihar and played a vital role in drafting the organization's constitution. And finally, Sachindranath Sanyal was also a founder and is actually considered the senior-most intellectual backbone of the HRA. He authored the famous HRA manifesto titled The Revolutionary and wrote the classic memoir Bandi Jivan. Now the option of Gopinath Saha, this is the trap. He was a courageous revolutionary from Bengal who attempted to assassinate Charles Tegart, the police commissioner of Calcutta, in January 1924. He mistakenly killed an Englishman named Ernest Day instead. His sacrifice was praised widely, but he was not part of the founding council of the HRA in Kanpur. Courageous, yes. Founder, no. Question 3. With reference to the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946, consider two statements. Statement 1 says it proposed a federal arrangement to preserve Indian unity while granting substantial autonomy to provinces. Statement 2 says both the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League rejected the plan. Which is correct? The answer is A. Only statement 1 is correct. The cabinet mission sent in 1946, comprising Pethick Lawrence, Stafford Cripps and A.V. Alexander, was the last serious British attempt to keep India united. It rejected the demand for a sovereign Pakistan and instead proposed a brilliant but complicated three-tier structure. A weak center controlling only defense, foreign affairs and communications, strong provinces, and a middle tier of groupings, provinces grouped into sections A, B, and C based on religious majorities. So the Muslim majority provinces in the northwest and Bengal could function as a cohesive bloc within a united India. Now, statement 2 is the classic UPSC trap. Students assume both parties, that is, the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, rejected it. That is wrong. Initially, both accepted it. The Muslim League accepted in June 1946 because it saw the grouping clause as the basis and foundation for an eventual Pakistan. The Indian National Congress accepted in July 1946 but viewed the grouping as optional rather than mandatory. The collapse came because of Jawaharlal Nehru's press conference on July 10, 1946, where he stated that Congress would enter the Constituent Assembly unfettered by agreements. The Muslim League took this as Congress repudiating the grouping arrangement, withdrew its acceptance, and announced Direct Action Day. That single speech effectively doomed the cabinet mission plan and made partition almost inevitable. Question 4. Two statements on the Indian National Army or INA. Statement 1 says, the Indian National Army was formed in Singapore to conduct a military campaign for the liberation of India. Statement 2 says, before the arrival of Subhash Chandra Bose, initial steps towards the organization of the INA were taken by Rash Bihari Bose. Which statements are not correct? The answer is B. Only statement 2 is not correct. Let me trace the full journey so this becomes unforgettable. Subhash Chandra Bose escaped India in March 1941 and initially went to seek Soviet Union's help. When the Soviet Union joined the Allied powers in June 1941, that door closed. He then went to Germany. In February 1943, he boarded a submarine and traveled to Japan, arriving in Southeast Asia to organize an armed struggle with Japanese support. Statement 1 is correct. In Singapore, Subhash Chandra Bose formally organized and led the Azad Hind Fauj, the Indian National Army, to liberate India through armed force. Statement 2 is where students go wrong. The question says, Rash Bihari Bose took the initial steps before Subhash Chandra Bose arrived. That is incorrect. The actual person who took the initial organizational steps for the Indian National Army was General Mohan Singh. Rash Bihari Bose was an older revolutionary who assisted Subhash Chandra Bose after his arrival. He was a mentor figure, not the initiator of the Indian National Army's organization. Question 5. The newspapers Sandhya and Yugantar that advocated revolutionary terrorism in Bengal were immediately started after which movement? The non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, the Swadeshi movement, or the Quit India movement? The answer is C, the Swadeshi movement. After 1905 and the partition of Bengal, the Swadeshi movement exploded. The youth of Bengal were filled with rage at colonial arrogance and British repression. Many of them had lost faith in passive resistance. They felt that petitions and boycotts were not enough to end British rule. So a section of young Bengali revolutionaries began looking at the methods of the Irish terrorists and the Russian nihilists. Targeted assassination of unpopular officials seemed to them a more direct form of resistance. In 1904, V.D. Savarkar had already organized the Abhinava Bharat, a secret revolutionary society. After 1905, this revolutionary energy found a press voice. Sandhya and Yugantar in Bengal and Kal in Maharashtra became the leading voices of revolutionary terrorism in the Indian nationalist press. So the sequence to remember is: Partition of Bengal 1905 triggers the Swadeshi movement, which radicalizes Bengali youth, which produces the revolutionary press including Sandhya and Yugantar. Moving on to question 6. Indian cotton exports to Britain declined steadily after 1865 due to which reason? Imposition of a heavy export duty, end of the American Civil War, expansion of railways in India, or seizure of ports by British authorities? The answer is B, the end of the American Civil War. This is an important question because it shows how a war in America directly devastated farmers in the Deccan. During the American Civil War from 1861 to 1865, the American South, which was the world's largest supplier of cotton to British textile mills, was blockaded. Lancashire mills faced a catastrophic cotton famine. Britain urgently turned to India as an alternative source, and Indian cotton exports boomed massively. Prices shot up, farmers in Maharashtra and Gujarat suddenly had high incomes, and many took on new land and loans, expecting this boom to continue. Then, in 1865, the American Civil War ended. American cotton, which was of superior quality with longer staple fiber and cheaper to produce, flooded back into the British market. British mills immediately shifted back to American cotton. Indian exports collapsed almost overnight. The farmers who had borrowed heavily, expecting high cotton prices, were now trapped in catastrophic debt. This agrarian distress became one of the primary causes of the Deccan riots of 1875, where Deccan peasants rose up against the moneylender class. Question 7. With reference to the Santhal Rebellion, how many of these statements are correct? 1. The permanent settlement was one of the factors that led to the rebellion. 2. It initially arose as a protest against Mahajans and Zamindars along with oppressive government functionaries. 3. After the rebellion, a separate administrative unit called Santhal Pargana was created. The answer is C. All three are correct. The Santhal Rebellion or Santhal Hool of 1855 to 1856 was one of the most powerful tribal uprisings in Indian history, and all three statements capture its essential truth. Statement 1 is correct. The permanent settlement of 1793 had categorized the Santhal forest lands, known as Damini Ko, as the property of the state and the newly created class of zamindars. The Santhals, who had historically been the forest clearers and cultivators of this land, suddenly found themselves reduced to heavily taxed tenants on their own ancestral territory. This was the foundational injustice that created the conditions for rebellion. Statement 2 is correct. While the British were the ultimate authority, the immediate and most visible enemies for the Santhals were the Mahajans or moneylenders and the zamindars. The Mahajans charged exorbitant interest rates and trapped Santhals in permanent debt bondage. The zamindars extracted maximum rent, and the government police and tax collectors actively supported these exploiters. Life had become completely unbearable. Statement 3 is correct. After the British brutally suppressed the rebellion, they recognized that these tribal grievances needed a dedicated administrative solution. They passed the Santhal Pargana Tenancy Act and created a separate administrative unit covering approximately 5,500 square miles, designated as a non-regulation district. Special laws were enacted to prevent the transfer of tribal land to non-tribals, locally called dikkus. This was an important acknowledgement that standard colonial administration had failed tribal communities. Question 8. Three statements on constitutional development. 1. The Regulating Act of 1773 was the first step by British Parliament to control and regulate the East India Company. 2. Pitt's India Act of 1784 established a system of dual government. 3. The Charter Act of 1813 abolished the company's trade monopoly in India, allowing all British subjects to trade. How many are correct? The answer is C. All three are correct. Think of these three acts as a staircase of increasing parliamentary control over the East India Company. The Regulating Act of 1773 was the first leash. Parliament was alarmed that a trading company had become a territorial power governing millions of Indians. It forced the Court of Directors to submit all civil, military and revenue correspondence to the British Treasury and Secretary of State. Parliamentary oversight was introduced for the first time, but the company still ran day-to-day operations. Pitt's India Act of 1784 was a much tighter leash. It created a new body called the Board of Control, representing the British government directly. This board would supervise and control the Court of Directors. This is the dual government. The company nominally still existed, but the British government now had supreme authority over all civil, military, and revenue affairs. The company had become a subordinate instrument of the Crown. The Charter Act of 1813 broke the trade monopoly. British merchants outside the company had long demanded a share of India's trade. Parliament agreed. The company's general trade monopoly with India was abolished, and all British subjects could now trade freely. However, and this is the key detail students miss, the company retained two specific monopolies for another 20 years, the tea trade and all trade with China. Question 9. The followers of the Young Bengal Movement, how many of these statements about them are not correct? 1. They were pioneers in raising the voice for peasants. 2. They carried forward Raja Rammohan Roy's ideology. 3. They called for better treatment for Indian labour in British colonies. The answer is A. Only one statement is not correct, and that is statement 1. The Young Bengal Movement was led by the Derosians, followers of Henry Louis Vivian Derosio, who taught at Hindu College in Calcutta. They were radical thinkers who attacked decadent customs, superstitions, and old traditions. They were passionate advocates of women's rights and education. Statement 1 is the trap, and it is wrong. The Derosians did not take up the peasant cause. They were intellectuals ahead of their time, but there was no social class or organized group in Indian society at that moment that could support such advanced and radical ideas. The social conditions were simply not ripe. So despite being progressive on many fronts, the peasant struggle was not one they engaged with. Statements 2 and 3 are both correct. They absolutely carried forward Ram Mohan Roy's tradition of using newspapers, pamphlets, and public associations to educate the public on social, economic, and political questions. And they did agitate actively on public issues, including revision of the company's charter, freedom of the press, and better treatment for Indian labour in British colonies abroad. So remember, Derosians were radical intellectuals, yes. Champions of peasants, no. Last question. 4 statements on Wood's Despatch of 1854. 1. It was the first comprehensive plan for the spread of education in India. 2. It asked the government to promote the downward filtration theory. 3. It recommended English for higher education and vernaculars at school level. 4. It recommended a system of grants in aid to encourage private enterprise. How many are correct? The answer is C. Only 3 are correct. Statement 2 is incorrect. Let me take you through this carefully because Wood's Dispatch is called the Magna Carta of English education in India and UPSC expects detailed knowledge of it. Statement 1 is correct. Prepared by Charles Wood in 1854, it was genuinely the first comprehensive and systematic plan for mass education across India. Before this, education policy was fragmented and inconsistent. Statement 2 is the trap and it is wrong. Students assume Wood's Dispatch supported the downward filtration theory, the idea that you educate the elite and let education filter down naturally to the masses. Actually, Wood's Dispatch explicitly repudiated this theory. It said the government must take direct responsibility for the education of the masses. This was a significant policy shift. Statement 3 is correct. English was recommended as the medium of instruction for higher education at colleges and universities. Vernacular languages were to be used at the primary and school level. This created the two-tier language hierarchy in Indian education that persisted throughout the colonial period. Statement 4 is correct. Wood's Dispatch recommended grants in aid to encourage private educational enterprise. It also stressed female education, vocational training, teacher training, and stipulated that government institutions must be secular. The structural hierarchy it proposed was vernacular primary schools at the village level at the bottom, then Anglo-vernacular high schools at the district level, then affiliated colleges, and at the top, affiliating universities in the presidency towns of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras. That is a wrap on all 10 questions. Excellent practice for Prelims 2026. Subscribe to CivilsCore for daily revision. All the best.